Hello and good evening, everybody. And tonight, I'd like to welcome everyone to this episode of Album Rant. And as you can see from what is right in front of you and the title of the video, I am going to once again talk about the boys from Canada, the Canadian power trio entitled Rush, consisting of Geddy Lee on bass and lead vocals, Alex Lifeson on lead guitar, and the one and only Neil Peart on the drums. May he rest in peace. And I am choosing to talk tonight about their 8th studio released in 1981, entitled Moving Picture. And this is considered by many to be one of their strongest efforts. And I did kind of talk about this on my Rush album ranking video, and I encourage you to check that out for any additional insight on the matter. But as per usual, I just want to kind of give you a history of what came before this and how we got here. They originated in the early 70s, late 60s actually. And I believe the 3 original members were Alex Lifeson on lead guitar, of course. Someone by the name of Jeff Jones, I want to say, could have that wrong, on bass guitar. And then John Rutsey on drums. And at some point between their inception and their first album in 1974, there was a lineup change. Jeff Jones was out and was replaced by Geddy Lee on bass guitar and lead vocals. And Geddy Lee definitely has a very unique voice. He has a very, very high voice. I wouldn't quite call it falsetto, but a lot of people that have heard me listening to Rush have confused him with a female vocalist. I guess they thought the band was Heart or somebody, but no. Definitely male. But they released their very first album, like I said, in the year 1974, and it was just entitled Rush. And I thought it was a very solid album, and it is one of my personal favorites. I believe I ranked it 4th, actually. And this was very much inspired by the works of Led Zeppelin. It really sounds like kind of a poor man's Led Zeppelin, and actually a little bit heavier than what Led Zeppelin was most accustomed to. But there were some great tracks on there, such as Finding My Way, Need Some Love, Take a Friend, Here Again, In the Mood, What You're Doing, Before and After, and of course the mighty 7+ minute epic closer, Working Man. And so I was very thoroughly impressed with their very first album, and it is really one of the all-time greatest. Now, unfortunately, fortunately, after that first album, there was another lineup change. John Rutsey on the drums was out, and he was replaced by who would be their longtime drummer until the very end of their career, Neil Peart. And this was essentially their classic lineup, and the lineup that would last for the rest of their tenure. And so the following year, in 1975, they released their second studio release entitled Fly By Night. And you just gotta love the album cover for that one. It's got a little owl on the cover. It's actually kind of funny. And this one, I would say, did continue the sound that was established on the debut record. But it was definitely kind of upping the ante a little bit. This was definitely kind of a shift towards prog rock, I wouldn't quite call it metal, but it was definitely prog rock. Kind of in the lines of, or in the realm of Yes, who was very well known for several 8+ minute epic numbers, and many of them being multi-part. This was most apparent on By Tour and the Snow Dog, which was about 8.5 minutes or so, and it again had several different movements within it, and I thought it was a really, really great standout. And one thing I really liked about it was, even though it's over 8 minutes, there was no big, long, epic intro that kind of eased itself into the song. We just have a little drumming at the very beginning, and it just kicks off really fast, straight from the beginning. I kind of appreciate the approach. But we also, on that album, some more highlights. We had Anthem. We had Best I Can, Beneath, Between, and Behind. And I think that is one of the most underrated Rush songs out there. Fly By Night, the title track. Making Memories, Rivendell, which delved into the works of J.R. Tolkien, and then finally the closer, In the End. Now, later that year, they released their third album entitled Caress of Steel. And yes, I did not rank that one last. In fact, I ranked it ninth, which is higher than some people would have put it, but I really, really love Caress of Steel. And, but something about it, Fly By Night hinted at traces of prog-rock. Caress of Steel took that and just blew it up and just ran with it because we had two very extended tracks. We had The Necromancer, which was once again based off the works of J.R. Tolkien, and we had The Fountain of Lament, which took up the entire second side. It was absolutely ridiculous. And of course, the other tracks on this album were, of course, Bastille Day. I think I'm going bald, as ridiculous as it was. And then, of course, the concert favorite, Lakeside Park. Now, this album did not fare very well with critics. And the record company was really highly encouraging them to kind of scale back their approach, kind of tone down the prog and the extended numbers. And I'm really kind of thankful that Rush did not listen to them and that they stuck by their morals and their principles, which would be themes recurring throughout their lyrics in the future, because they released my absolute favorite Rush album, the very following year in 1976, which was entitled 2112. And just like Caress of Steel, we have a multi-part epic 20-plus minute number taking up an entire side. The title track took up the entire first side, and I have talked about that extensively, and I love it. The second side is very strong as well because it has a passage to Bangkok, The Twilight Zone, Lessons, Tears, and Something for Nothing. And then following that year, later that year, they released their very first live album entitled All the World's a Stage, and that was another definite hit. So, going into the year 1977, they had fully embraced their prog influences, and they released A Farewell to Kings, which was another incredibly strong effort. Especially what is most likely one of my most favorite Rush songs ever, the 11-plus minute Xanadu, which is based off the poem Kubla Khan. And yes, the lyrics often did involve literature content around this time, and I really, really loved it. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to hear that song live, and on their final tour, they did play it, and you can imagine I went absolutely nuts. And it is really one of my favorite songs ever. It definitely reeks of drug influences, I can definitely tell, but it's just so mystical and magical, I love it. The title track was also good. We also had Cinderella Man. What else did we have? We also had Madrigal. We had Cygnus X1, which was another big proggy number. And then, of course, yes, we know, Closer to the Heart. So, obviously, Rush continued that trend on their sixth studio album, released the following year in 1978, entitled Hemispheres. This one got even more ridiculous. It was only 4 tracks. The first side was composed exclusively of a sequel to Cygnus X1, which was entitled Cygnus X1 Book 2 Hemispheres, which was composed of 5 different, it might have been 5 or 6, I can't remember, I think it's 5. 5 different movements that were strung together and flowed from one to the next, and it was a great prog number. We also had Circumstances, which probably one of the weaker songs from this era. We had The Trees, definitely another, it kind of makes you feel like they were under the influence when they wrote that. They may have been, I don't know. But one of the highlights is the album closer, La Villa Strangiato, which was a 9.5-minute instrumental, and it's one of the greatest instrumentals ever. You have definitely got to check that out if you have not checked that out. Now, the 70s were winding down. The 80s were about to begin, so of course that meant a change in direction. And in 1980, their 7th studio album came out, which I have reviewed on Album Rant before, entitled Permanent Waves. And they made a huge stride, or kind of a shift in direction towards more radio-friendly material. And I thought it was very good for what it was, but we got The Spirit of Radio, another definite Rush classic. And even though it's overplayed to death, I still have not gotten tired of it. We also had Free Will, another big radio hit, and it's still awesome. We also had Jacob's Ladder, Entre Nous, which is beyond underrated, and you have got to check out the version from Snakes and Arrows live. It's awesome. We had Different Strings, and then Natural Science, which was still kind of holding on to and retaining the prog influences from the 70s. Now, I am not going to talk too much about that album because I have already reviewed it, but what I do want to talk about tonight is their follow-up to Permanent Waves entitled Moving Pictures. And you can see the cover art right there. I kind of like it. But yes, we have people moving pictures, so I'm guessing that's what it's referring to. Or maybe it's kind of a pun in itself, and Rush loved to do that. So anyways, in June 1980, the Permanent Waves tour had ended, and it was deemed a success. And I'm not sure how valid this is, but I have heard a rumor this was their first tour to actually make them money. The first tour to actually be profitable. I'm not quite sure how they made it as far as they did, if that was the case, but, you know, go figure. But initially, they wanted to make another live album to kind of coincide with All the World's a Stage, but they later decided that another studio album would be more appropriate. And something I didn't quite mention earlier is the lyrical content on Permanent Waves was, at least according to Neil Peart and Geddy Lee, it was considered to be more direct and concise rather than dealing with more fantasy themes which were prevalent on some of their 70s work. And that approach definitely continued on Moving Pictures. And of course, they, as before, wanted to try to write some more radio-friendly songs, which I can appreciate for what it is, or for what it was. But this was recorded at Stony Lake, Ontario. And I've actually seen some videos of the recording sessions, and it looks like a pretty cool place to hang. So this right here, like I said, the album cover. Let's see what we have in here. Come on. Yes, so we have some credits right there. What do we have there? Yeah, some credits. There's the band. There is Geddy. There is the professor right there. And there is Alex, who is the one original member who never left the band. So over here on the back, we have some lyrics, and I will be getting into those in just a second. But let's go ahead and flip over here on the back. Let's get that back in there. Come on. Yeah, that's good enough. All right, so over here on the back, we have more artwork, and this right here is the track list. Now, it kicks off with, yes, you guessed it, Tom Sawyer, the song that is overplayed to death on the radio. And as I said, this was a definite move towards more radio-friendly music. And I gotta say, even though the synthesizers were starting to become more prevalent at the time, I don't feel that they overshadowed the rest of the band, such as the bass and the guitars, as it would on later albums. And I thought they struck a very good balance on this one. But apparently they had a lot of trouble with the writing of this song and the recording of the song, and it actually almost didn't happen, which is quite interesting considering this is their all-time biggest hit. But, you know, it starts off kind of slow, and then Geddy comes in with that very, very iconic intro, and it goes, you know, a modern-day warrior, mean stride, today's Tom Sawyer, mean pride. I may have messed that up. And, again, the song just starts getting very hard-hitting right from the gate, and it is just a beast within itself. It does not follow the standard verse-chorus arrangement. I mean, we do have, after the first verse, you know, we have the very iconic the world is segment there. But after the second one, it actually goes into first a keyboard solo and then a very aggressive interlude, which is led by the bass. It goes and it's just absolutely incredible. Okay, but actually, it's kind of funny. The very first time I saw these guys, before they played Tom Sawyer, there was actually a video intro by the creators of South Park where the four boys are pretending to be in a Rush cover band, and Cartman was the singer, and he got Tom Sawyer mixed up with Huckleberry Finn. It was actually kind of funny, but that is not actually a South Park episode, so that would mean that the guys, Trace Parker and Matt Stone, recorded that segment just for Rush, I guess. As far as I can tell, that's the case, so that's actually pretty incredible. So now we move to the second track entitled Red Barchetta. Barchetta, I'm going to say it like I did. And this is kind of a slower song, and I wouldn't call it a power ballad by any stretch of the imagination, but this is the closest the album gets to a power ballad, and this has been described as very Orwellian in nature. And apparently it's about, some kind of dystopian society, some kind of dystopian fascist authoritarian society, which pops up in this band's lyrics quite a bit, I must say. And it's about someone who lives on some kind of a farm, and I think his uncle has a red Barchetta, and he likes to take it out for a nice morning drive and speed and go very fast and kind of rebel against the system, which, we all have to do every now and then, but don't go too far with that. But again, it's very slow, but let me back up. It's very slow at the beginning, but then things really start to pick up, but it never loses that emotional punch to it. Oftentimes, kind of slower songs try to prey on your emotions, and it doesn't really work out sometimes. I think it really does work out here, and the rhythm is just so incredible. I love it, and I really love that interlude that just goes dun 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 dun. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, wind in my hair, shifting and drifting, and I just gotta say, I really, really love that interlude, that middle section. But yes, it then starts picking up after that with a nice little bass intro, and then the song just starts coming right back in with that dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I love that rhythm, I love that song, I love Red Barchetta. I have seen these guys 4 times, twice on the Snakes and Arrows tour, once on the Time Machine tour, and once on the R40 tour, and they played this song twice. The second time on Snakes and Arrows, and every night on the Time Machine tour, because they played this entire album in its entirety on the Time Machine tour, and I really, really love that. But yes, I highly recommend Red Barchetta. Then we come to track number 3, which is YYZ, which is an instrumental. It was actually nominated for a Grammy for Best Rock Instrumental. It's very interesting, actually. It's got kind of a staccato feel going on. It's kind of like dun 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 dun. And apparently, the YYZ is named after the IATA airport code for the Toronto Pearson International Airport. And I think, from what I understand, the IATA code is basically a code that designates and identifies the airport. Okay, very interesting. And the rhythm is based off of Morse code for the letters YYZ, which is quite interesting. In case you haven't noticed by now, Rush can kind of be a weird band sometimes. I mean, just, again, watch some of the videos that come before some of their songs in concert. They're quite bizarre, but it's also quite interesting, okay? Now, from what I understand, this originated from a jam session between Geddy and Neil, and it evolved into one of the greatest instrumentals ever, and apparently they had a very fun time with La Villa Strangiato a few albums ago, and they decided to do another instrumental, and I think this one works out very, very well. Maybe not as well as La Villa Strangiato, but it's still a definite classic. But one thing I really want to touch upon is there's a very kind of soft and kind of mellow interlude in the middle where Geddy on the keyboard kind of takes over a bit, and it's just kind of a synth section, if that makes any sense. But then, of course, the song picks right back up and we go back to that main rhythm. And it's just such a catchy song, and it is highly recommended, okay? I heard them play this 3 times, every time except the R40 tour. They were playing it every now and then during the R40 tour. I just didn't hear it the night I actually saw them. But then we come to the very final track off of side 1 entitled Limelight. Yes, that Limelight. Da-na-na-na-na-na, da-na-na. And this one is one of the more hard rocking songs, and I really, really love it. I don't think there's really that many synthesizers on it. But like I said, the synthesizers on Moving Pictures really complement everything else very well. I'm not complaining about it. Just this one seems to be more of a raw and straight up rock song as compared to some of the more experimental things they would try on this album. But it's based on a autobiographical account by Neil Peart, where he's talking about some of the pressures and stresses that come with being in the limelight. And this would be a theme that would also appear in his lyrics quite often going forward, most specifically the song Mission off the Hold Your Fire album, which is one of the few highlights from that album. But yes, this does make an allusion to the camera eye, which I will talk about later, and it also references the William Shakespeare poem As You Like It, where he says, all the world's a stage and we are merely players. And that's also an allusion to their first live album entitled All the World's a Stage. But yes, this one's a little bit slow, but again, the songwriting is strong, the rhythm is strong, the lyrics are strong, everything about it clicks, and I absolutely love it. So that was the end of side 1. And we have 4 definite Rush classics on this one. My favorite switches all the time, but tonight it is Red Barchetta. I know this is kind of the slower song and the more emotional song, but it just hits the highs that it's trying to, and it clicks perfectly. I think I'm going to say Red Barchetta for now, but ask me another day, it could be Limelight, it could be Tom Sawyer. Well, it probably won't be Tom Sawyer anytime soon, considering how overplayed it is, but that's my opinion tonight, and you're going to have to take it and run with it. So now we come to side number 2, and this side only contains 3 songs. And the reason for that is the first one, The Camera Eye, is over 10 minutes. This is Rush's attempt to still hold on to the prog influences from their previous albums, and this is their big epic prog number. And it's great, okay? This is an incredibly underrated Rush track. This does not appear on any of the greatest hits albums, probably due to its length, but they played it twice when I saw them in concert. The first time being on the Time Machine tour, and it had to be played on the Time Machine tour because they played all of Moving Pictures. And then I heard it on the R40 tour, and I was pleasantly surprised, and I went absolutely nuts. But this is broken up into 2 different segments. It is called the New York segment and the London segment. And apparently the lyrics deal with how Neil Peart feels about both cities. Okay, take that for what you will. But this one does not just come out swinging like maybe some of the other songs that are on here. This one has a definite buildup. You hear some cars in the background. And actually, when I heard this on the R40 tour, because I heard the cars in the background when the song was pumping up, I thought they were about to do Red Barchetta, but I was wrong. It was The Camera Eye. And this thing just keeps building and building and building. There are some synthesizers in the intro, but it doesn't matter. They complement the song so incredibly well. And eventually the band just starts coming in, and it just starts getting explosive until it dies down. Now, by this point, even though the band has come in, it's been a rather slow number. All of that changes around the 2.5, maybe 3 minute mark or so. I can't quite remember. But Geddy comes in on the keyboards and he is playing very, very fast. Neil then comes in on the drums and he goes, and man, it's incredible. And then finally Alex comes in and the entire song just explodes. It gets very fast and it is just so well written. I love it. And then before the vocals start, we get that one section where it's like dun 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 dun. And then Geddy comes in and his vocals are just perfect. He sings it perfectly. They are mixed perfectly. And it sounds kind of haunting in itself, but that's not a bad thing. And it complements the mood of the song so well. And I gotta try to explain this correctly. When I first heard this song, I thought a great way in concert to introduce it was to play the first little segment just over the loudspeaker. The band's not actually playing. And then when Geddy comes in on the keyboard, by this point, there are no lights. You can't see the band. Geddy comes in and a light shines on him. Then Neil comes in and a light shines on him. And then finally Alex comes in and a light shines on him. And then when the band starts jamming and starts going really fast, the lights just go crazy and haywire. And it actually turns out that in the 80s, that was how they opened the song. And I thought that was really kind of incredible. But yes, after the first segment, the song kind of dies down a little bit and starts getting slow again, but then it starts building up again. It's coming back and it's ready for another round, and then we explode into the London segment, and it's just as great. Someone told me after hearing this for the first time, it's a 10+ minute song, but it doesn't feel like a 10+ minute song, and I think that is just a statement and an testament to how engaging and enthralling this song is and how you just lose all track of time while listening to it. And that's probably the biggest compliment anyone can ever give a musical artist. Now we come to Witch Hunt. And I heard this first on the Snakes and Arrows tour. They were playing a lot of deep cuts on that tour, stuff I did not expect them to play, such as Entre Nous and Circumstances and Between the Wheels. Well, they did play Witch Hunt on that tour also, and I was kind of surprised to hear it, but they did. And this one is actually part of a segment. It's actually one of 4 parts in something called the Fear series. Now, this is considered to be part 3 of Fear, but it was the first one released. Yeah, I don't quite understand that, but whatever. The other parts would be part 2, The Weapon off of Signals, part 1, The Enemy Within off Grace Under Pressure, and part 4, Freeze off of Vapor Trails. And this one is very dark. This one is very slow, and it's got a very creepy atmosphere around it. But I think it's all about how what a witch hunt is you're going after someone, you're trying to persecute someone, and you're just relying on the flimsiest evidence that you can find because you have already predetermined your conclusion. You've already predetermined that this person is guilty, and so you will shove whatever square peg in a round hole you have to. And this was very apparent during the Salem witch trials, and, well, currently actually, but we won't get into that. And it's a very different number than what came before it. As of now, this is probably the softest song that we've seen so far, and it's definitely very heavily driven by the synthesizers. In the middle, the synthesizers just kind of take over for a bit. And like I said, it's creepy, but may not quite make it the strongest song on this album, but I do think it is really, really good. And then it closes with Vital Signs. This was the last song written for the album, and this is a definite change in pace. They really adopt more of a reggae feel to it, and this is something that was hinted at on the Permanent Waves album, and this is something that will be more fully and completely explored on future albums such as Signals, but I think it's pretty good for what it is, but it's kind of slow, and it doesn't really have the punch that maybe some of the other songs in this album did. It really sounds like it came off the Signals album, and that's not a bad thing because Signals is a very strong album. I just think the other stuff on here was a lot better than Vital Signs, but it's still very, very good, and I think it closes out the album very well. But yeah, like I said, keyboard intro, synthesizer intro, and like I said, kind of delves more into reggae rather than rock or whatever. But that's fine because Rush was no stranger to other genres. They were no stranger to branching out, and I definitely do respect that for what it is. But if I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm going to tell you what my favorite song from side 2 is, it is The Camera Eye, and I do not even have to think about that one. It is no contest. It is The Camera Eye, and this would really be one of their last... Actually, let me back up. This would be their last album that had any prog influences on it for a very long time. The next time I definitely saw them doing prog was actually Clockwork Angels in 2012, which was their last album. And they would kind of take the song Vital Signs or the style adopted on Vital Signs and would run with it on their next album, Signals. And it was good for what it is, but I ranked Signals lower than Moving Pictures, and I do stand by that. So anyways, thank you all very much for joining me tonight. I had a great time talking about Moving Pictures. If I am back next week, the next episode I do is going to be quite the conquest. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.